to take your seats and let's begin our event. So my name is Shilpa and I would like to warmly welcome everyone here. I've actually been standing here wanting to start, but soaking in and taking up all of the warmth, friendliness, and hospitality that all of you share between you has been wonderful to watch. And for that, once again, welcome and thank you for coming to our event. It is wonderful to have you all here, and I want you to sit back and relax and enjoy the show. Over to Savina.
The early morning shower had filled the pug marks left on the narrow sandy track, making small puddles glistening as light filtered through the overcast skies and forest canopy in this Ranthambore landscape. The author of these is Sultana, a 6-year-old confirmed charger with a very young litter somewhere in this area. Just as she veered off the track to leave her scent, we sneaked past, feeling great at taking a cheeky single in a 2020 match, not aware of the body liner bouncers which were to come. Maneuvering in this terrain was a challenge, and the constant revving of the engine disturbed the tranquility of the forest. Or perhaps the litter was somewhere close by. Either way, she had been angered. Turning the corner, crouching down momentarily, and without the customary bugle sound, we were already under attack. Even though the engine sound had died as instructed by our naturalist. I would have been thrilled with just head-on shots of the Queen on this morning patrol in this beautiful setting and hadn't hoped for any more. But she had raised the bar, taking things in stride. I continued to shoot the charge while the others in the jeep took cover behind, making a small sacrificial offering to this mystical creature. As anticipated, she changed tactics and stopped just short. I was not scared till now, perhaps feeling a sense of safety being inside the metal-clad walls of my 4x4 wheels. Tigers would normally carry on with their business and wander off, or if the intention was to scare, there would have been growling and intimidation. But she had other plans. Circumnavigating the jeep, she climbed the embankment to our left, came up parallel, crouched, partially hidden behind a small shrub, only an easy leap away. Perhaps her intention was to get a closer look at the nature of this beast. Navigating through the leaves, I tried to frame her head, which was overflowing the viewfinder, looking through the long prime lens, which has been in my hand all along, staying absolutely still and not making any sudden moves so as not to alarm her. I kept shooting with the heavy glass, barely managing to keep steady, not due to the weight, but due to the emotions going through me. I was thinking this almost 4 kg cannon could double up as a weapon of last resort if she breached our tiny fort from the aerial route. Her canines and our heads were at level, and this was the disturbed tiger. I'm not sure what she might have been thinking, but I believe tigers lack a sense of humor. Admittedly, the next moments were long and tense. A sense of vulnerability had sunk in, and my heart was in my mouth, so as to speak. Glued to the ground, it was checkmate, game, set, match. This piece Sunil has titled Encounter Specialist in his book, Long Live the Tiger. And I would now like to go ahead and welcome, dear friends, a very warm welcome to everyone here today. Sunil joins me in welcoming all of you to this book release and photo exhibition. Photography has always been his passion, but the subject he has chosen now needs a story to be told. Save the tiger. Saving the tiger, Sunil believes, is the most defined pathway to securing our own future through thriving forests and other natural ecosystems around us. To talk more about how the tiger paves the way towards healthy forests and water security, we have with us today a very learned panel who among them represent the whole framework that goes into the conservation of wildlife and forests. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Savina, for the warm welcome. And I would like to now introduce our panelists for the evening and later on invite them to the stage. So I will begin by introducing Mr. Harish Salve, who actually really does not need any introduction to anyone here today, and indeed to most Indian citizens. However, I will take the liberty and the privilege to say a few words. Mr. Harish N. Salve, King's Counsel and Senior Advocate, Supreme Court of India, and former Solicitor General of India. He is a supporter and advocate for wildlife conservation, having argued several important cases pro bono and served as amicus curiae to the Supreme Court of India. Welcome, Mr. Salve. Thank you for coming to our event. Dr. Ulas Karanth is a renowned conservation scientist, is a leading expert on tigers, and emeritus director of the Center for Wildlife. His unwavering commitment and lifetime dedicated to tiger science and conservation has made him an internationally respected and independent voice in the field of global tiger conservation. He is the author of Among Tigers, a widely acclaimed book, and several other scientific books and publications on tigers. Welcome to our event, sir. Dr. Raghu Chandawat is a conservation biologist, specializing in tigers and snow leopards. Dr. Chandawat's extensive research has provided valuable insight into these magnificent big cats. Dr. Chandawat is now a tourism professional and a leading advocate of extending the reach of conservation beyond protected area boundaries using inclusive models of conservation. He has also co-authored a widely read book, The Rise and Fall of the Emerald Tigers, along with Joanna van Grusen, which is based on 10 years of his own research on the tigers of the Panna Tiger Reserve. Also welcoming Mr. Mr. N. Sunil Kumar, former Director for Sustainable Banking at the NatWest Group of Banks, a banker turned conservationist. He has started and supported several initiatives in tiger corridors and other ecologically sensitive and vital areas. Presently, Sunil heads Nature-Based Solutions, Strategy and Origination at Iora Ecological Solutions, which is an environmental advisory group committed to nature-based solutions for forestry, biodiversity conservation, and climate change. By the way, Mr. Kumar is our moderator for the evening and will guide the panel through an engaging and insightful session. Also, our guests for today are Mr. Amitabh Kant. Thank you and welcome for joining us. Decades in public policy and planning and long-time CEO of Niti and India's Sherpa to the G20. Many of you may recall the campaign, God's Own Country, a proponent of tourism as an instrument of economic growth and ecological management. Mr. Kant has been of a great impact on India's development story. Thank you, sir. Also is Mr. Sunil Sethi, who is the curator of tonight's event. He serves as an honorary capacity as the chairman of Fashion Design Council of India and advisor to the Khadi and Village Industries Commission. He is the founder of IndieEye, Sunil Sethi Design Alliance, and has curated many engaging exhibitions related to design, fashion, and art in India and abroad, and is a friendly and familiar face to all the panelists today. So now I would like to invite on stage, please join us, Mr. Amitabh Kant. A round of applause, please. Mr. Harish Salve, please join us on stage. Mr. Sunil Sethi. Ms. Savina Gadhoke and Mr. Sunil Gadhoke. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's not delay. This is the moment that we have all been waiting for. It's time for the book launch. Thank you, everyone. Let's also have a family photo. Thank you, everyone. So now, additionally invited to the stage, may I please call Mr. Sunil Kumar. Dr. Chandawat and Dr. Karanth. Thank you again, panelists, and over to our moderator for the evening, Mr. Sunil Kumar.
Thanks, Shilpa. Thank you for those generous introductions. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. There's a bit of a confusion with too many Sunils flying around. To clarify once again, I'm Sunil Kumar. Sunil, the man of the evening, already you have met. Sunil Sethi, yes. So I hope the names are now very clear now. Yes. Let me start, Mr. Salve. So your journey with environmental law is something that is too well known to be elaborated. Dotted with many landmarks which have made a big impact on conservation in India. You are trusted by all the stakeholders of conservation in India, the conservation community itself, the establishment, the judiciary. You have been amicus curiae. Now, walking this tightrope must have been a very difficult one, with fragile habitats and ecosystems on one end of this tightrope, and the much needed land for infrastructure and other requirements of our aspiring economic, aspiring society. How did you manage this, sir?
I think we need to put matters in perspective. I've been privileged, I've been fortunate to be the voice for people like Ullas and his colleagues and other similar people who not only have the domain knowledge, but who have the passion for conserving wildlife, for conserving nature, for conserving our forests. All I did was put across their point of view with as much passion as I could muster. And that was not difficult, because when you work with people like Ullas and other conservationists, one of them I don't see here, Mr. Thapar, he's not come today. When you meet people like that, they are inspiring. And they fill you with so much energy that the path ahead becomes clear and the path ahead becomes easy. So I think my role may have been more prominent, but it is the most overrated role. It is these people who are the warriors of Mother Nature. It is these people who have dedicated their lives to working for conservation. And if today this beautiful animal is not extinct, if today there is still flora and fauna, and if today India still has forests, it's thanks to all these people.
Thank you, Mr. Salve. Mr. Amitabh Kant, he has a hard stop at 6, I think, so I'm aware of the concepts of the clock. Sir, if I can take a liberty and say that when it comes to tourism as a tool for conservation, many people say that Mr. Amitabh Kant is the tiger. It's an important tool for conservation, but it has had its own critics, and we have had people on both the sides Some have found it as an important tool for conservation, and some said it really distracts. It would be good to hear your thought on this one.
So just a couple of points. When I first landed up in Kerala and I got my posting as Secretary Tourism as a punishment posting. So I realized that, and I went to Periyar Game Sanctuary, I went to Perambikulam, and I realized that there were just no tigers there. And the first job that I did was that we started interacting with the poachers. And it took us a lot of work. We worked with a lot of young dynamic foresters, and we converted poachers into guides. And they knew these poachers knew the forest much better than any forester. We gave them about a 6 months income in advance, but then we soon realized that it was an economic necessity for them. They ran out of money after 6 months, and then we had to put money into their bank accounts for the next 5 years, but they were the most admirable people, the poachers, who had turned into guides. And then I realized actually that, the forests are too important a place to be left only to the foresters. And it's very important that there's an element of human touch to that. Now that human touch is important, but it must be based on the carrying capacity of the forest. And it's very important because tigers are the most iconic, they are the most majestic, they are the most charismatic cat ever born, and it's very important that we preserve them. Since we started the Project Tiger, and I'm glad Harish is here because he's been the amicus curiae in the Godavardhan case and so on. Now, when we started it, there were just 1,400 tigers. Today we have almost 3,500, 3,200 odd tigers. So it's been one of the most successful, actually, Project Tiger. As he rightly said, because of people like Ullas, one important thing is that there was an institutional mechanism in India. And it was possible because of this great partnership, because of people with immense amount of commitment. But I've always believed in my life that forests are too important to be left to the foresters. It's important for citizens to go to the forest, own the forest. And that owning up of the forest by the citizens of India must be done only based on the carrying capacity of that forest, not in excess. We can't afford to convert our forest into picnic parties. That's not feasible. And that carrying capacity must be done with very great extent of due diligence.
Thank you. You have also highlighted some of the downsides. So I would say something like a fire as a tool, use it well, it serves you very well. If you don't use it well, it could be counterproductive. Now, before I turn to the others for their views on this, I would like to go back to the star of the evening, Mr. Sunil Gadhoke. But I see several leading lights of tiger conservation in the audience today. I will have the privilege of taking one or two names. Mr. Dr. M.K. Ranjit Singh sitting there, and Mrs. Ranjit Singh, the doyen among conservationists in India today. And I would credit him with several major landmark initiatives, including policy formulation, and some of the best known parks in the country. So, thank you, sir, for coming. Yeah, some more time. Okay. So, sir, turning to Sunil Gadhoke, the star of the evening, the man of the evening. You say that you would like to use the book as a means to fight the imagination of Generation Next, to look at tiger conservation and through it towards India's ecological security. Can you tell us how you would like that to happen?
Well, yeah, I think first of all, my motivation for this book was to draw attention of us Indians as well as the world community to the excellent work that has happened over the last 50 years to save the tiger from the brink of extinction. While in the same period of time, there were many other countries who have lost their tigers, and those that remain outside of India are mostly in the critically endangered zone. So that can put things in perspective today, because we are really the last bastion for tiger conservation. And when we look at tiger conservation, I think a lot of you can ask the question, why do we need to put so much effort behind tiger conservation? It's just another animal. Of course, it is our heritage, but a lot of effort goes into tiger conservation, and there are only 3,000 about. So you got to understand that it's when you have a tiger that is flourishing in a forest, it means that the entire ecosystem is flourishing, which basically is getting us to the next stage. We are actually helping climate change. If we develop more forests and if we reclaim our degraded forests, we are eventually going to have tigers there, and we are therefore working towards climate change. And the next most important part, and as Amitabh also mentioned today, this is our heritage. And the young population of India we have the youngest population in the world, which is all growing up, and they're financially very well off. The need for tourism in these areas is going to grow. And as Amitabh said, there is so much carrying capacity that these forests can take. So there is anyway an emergent need to reclaim more land back into forest and develop those forests eventually for tigers. And that entire ecosystem that we create, which will be a financial model along with entertainment, along with preservation, along with climate change. So this is a big story actually that India can ride on, and the youth of India can ride on. And ultimately it's a win-win situation for everyone, I think.
Thanks, Sunil. The symbiotic relationship between man and nature that you often speak of, Sunil, is something that is now fully acknowledged by science. It's now recognized at the UN, the UNFCCC, the UNCBD as well. And it is said that biodiversity loss and climate change actually have been feeding on each other. And we have to fix both together. It won't work if we fix one and neglect the other. Despite that, while increasing emissions is a concern, the loss of biodiversity worldwide is a big time concern. And the biggest way this loss of biodiversity happens through land use change, and the biggest way the land use change happens through loss of forests. More than 40% of biodiversity loss is on account of forest. Good part of greenhouse gas emissions is on account of forest loss. Globally, the political leadership and the markets have failed to fix this, and we know the reasons for that. At the cost of sounding a little bit naive, I would ask Mr. Salve, do you think law can step in here to bring in that necessary coercion if necessary, or balance it with facilitation to make this happen? Is that something that's possible? International law, domestic laws?
Not only is it possible, it is what has arrested the decline of Indian forests. It's the story of the Godavarman case is interesting. There was a fight between two contractors over a khair tree auction in Kashmir. I appeared for one of them. Ultimately, they decided to share the loot and not to press the case. When the case came up, the judges, I remember it was Justice Verma and Justice Kirpal, they sent for me. They said, why aren't you here? I said, I have not been briefed today. They said, they may not have paid your fees, but this relates to the forest. And why are you only fighting for one block of trees in Jammu? You must fight for the forests of India. And that's where it began. And we worked on it. And we found, of course, the government came and opposed strongly, and I don't blame the governments, because the governments are under pressures of development, teeming poverty, below poverty line figures which are mind-numbing, pressures of population and so on, become priorities for the government, and that's the political priority. I don't mean politics in the pejorative sense. I mean politics in the governance sense. And at that time to say, do not divert more land or put a limitation on how you divert land, do not allow industry to grow rampantly in areas which could be forests, was something which no government was happy with. And believe me, all governments have opposed this. So it is the Supreme Court which used its power of coercion, issuing a writ. Ultimately, we found a very simple solution. We said the courts are meant to enforce the law. It's called the writ of mandamus. And that's what the Supreme Court did. They enforced the Forest Conservation Act. They read the act in a way that breathed a new life, a whole ecosystem into the act itself. And that is how the governments worked. And you'll, as Amitabh rightly said, you can't leave it to the foresters. There has to be a whole union of society and different stakeholders to protect our forests. And what I found fascinating was, while some of the civil servants who came to support the government's case against the forest case would quietly send a message saying, can we have a little chat with you? And I would meet them in the cubicle, and they would give me facts and figures which I would tell the court on why the injunction should be granted. That is the commitment which people have, because they knew their job compels them to say, please don't stop this development. But their conscience drove them to say, what is going on is wrong. And that is how I think it's a matter of great pride that when we, I think at the time of independence, it was over about 40% of India was under forest cover, roughly 40%. When Mrs. Gandhi brought in the Forest Conservation Act, it was 30%, and by, less than that. And by 1996, when we started the Godavarman case, I think we were down to 8% or 10%, of which the real forests were 3%, which were only in the reserves. That is the rate of decline. I'm given to understand from the Forest Survey of India that at least the decline has stopped and there has been a marginal increase in forests. So yes, we have used the compulsion of law. For years, every Friday afternoon, the court would sit for 2 hours and hear it on application by application, zone by zone, state by state, and make sure that the states followed the law and stopped deforestation.
Thank you, sir. The strength of the judiciary law and the conscientiousness of the officers or the citizens actually speaks volumes of the integrity of the society that we have in India. That's so encouraging. I would like to ask a few questions to Dr. Ullas Karan. Ullas, I definitely would like to quiz you on one important law, but before that, I think I should request Mr. Kant, since he said he has got a hard stop, a message that you would like to give us either on tourism or anything that you think we as citizens can make a difference to tigers or a wilderness or wild habitats or forests.
Well, I'd just like to say that actually, the important point is that India's urbanization story has just begun. The next 5 decades, India is going to see 500 million Indians getting into the process of urbanization. I mean, India will be creating 2 Americas. So it's important, every minute there are 30 Indians moving from rural areas to urban areas. An important thing to realize is that if we do not keep our biodiversity intact, if we do not keep this great ecosystem on which tigers breed, we will lose a great heritage. It's the greatest heritage that we have. And this magnificent animal is something to be really taken care of. And therefore, this human-animal conflict, which we'll head for as we do unplanned, unsustainable urbanization. And therefore, to my mind, it's absolutely necessary that despite the law, it's the ownership of the citizen. I've been a long-term believer that, when we had the Project Tiger started, there were just 9 tiger reserves. Today you have 50 tiger reserves in India. You have 71,000 square kilometers under Project Tiger. So today you need citizens to take ownership of the forests, and that's very important to my mind. Any good project, and this is one of India's most successful projects. Project Tiger has been the most remarkable success story of India, to my mind. And for this to remain a great success story, the citizens of India must play a key and critical role. And I just want to compliment Sunil. I thought he was just a party goer, But today he's demonstrated, his remarkable exhibition. I mean, I was fortunate to see this. That what a positive, constructive man he is to take some of the most remarkable photographs and put them in one of the most astounding books I've seen in recent times on the tiger. So congratulations to Sunil. Thank you.
Thank you, Amitabh. Much humbled.
That was wonderful. I would say I think the tiger retrieval program has been one of the probably the most spectacular success story of a species retrieval program in the world. And it has been made possible by everyone together. Ulas, let me turn to you now. You and I go a long way. And I know that you have spent decades of probably almost close to half a century, although you yourself do not look half a century old. You've done work on the ground, you've carried out research, you've worked with stakeholders, you have seen conflict on the ground, you have lobbied in the corridors of power for policy changes, and you're so familiar with the severe demand for land from conflicting sources in a growing country like India. Despite that, you say with confidence that we can still hold 10,000 tigers. Where does that confidence come from?
Conservation is an applied science, just like medicine, engineering, where you use basic principles of biology or ecology and apply it to solve problems. So as a conservation scientist, that's my approach. So when we look at this numbers of tigers, for example, I grew up as a teenager in the Western Ghats when the last tigers were being shot. I saw the first 30 years of tiger recovery, which was the real Project Tigers achievement. That's when tigers came back from very low numbers to roughly 3,000. In the quarter century after that, we haven't gained that much, although we talk a lot about the gains, but the gains actually occurred much earlier. Our measurements were wrong, so the gains were not recorded properly. I can't go into details of it. But the question now is, nobody denies that India stands head and shoulders above any Asian country in conservation in general and tigers and elephants in particular. I have worked in Thailand, I have worked in Malaysia, I was leading the tiger program for WCS. No other country has the matching application of political system, judicial system, NGO community. It looks truly remarkable when you compare. But if you are a giant, you have to compare yourself to giant, not to pygmies. So the problem is, we had a colonial history that was much more beneficial compared to Portuguese or Dutch, where they just cleared the forest, Indonesia or wherever. We had a reserve forest system that was set up, on which Mrs. Gandhi could build in the 1970s. So if you had asked me the question, whether tiger would be there when I was a teenager on a motorcycle, I would have said tiger will go extinct in 1963, 64, if you had asked me. Today in the same landscape, instead of 70, there are 300 some tigers. So it's a success. Nobody is denying that. But let us look at how we have performed in other domains in the post-independence era. We now have an economy that is 5th largest in the world. We have an aspiration for a $5 trillion or a $10 trillion economy. Now, when I first made a phone call, there was an operator took 2 hours to connect you to Mangalore. We have had a telecom revolution. We had the green revolution of the 60s, now a complete genetic engineering revolution coming ahead. If we look at our achievement, and Mr. Narasimha Rao and others after him reformed the economy and took it out of stagnation, and we became a different country. absolute poverty has almost vanished in some southern states. And when we have compared to these achievements, I still say the entrepreneurial spirit of Indians, the involvement that these other sectors have declared, the agricultural revolution was science-based, the telecom revolution was science-based. We have not succeeded compared to all other domains where our economy is the 5th biggest in the world. In that sense, conservation has not been commensurate with the country's capacity. So my role is just like Galileo to say the Earth is not the center of the solar system. There are lots of challenges, and point out what those challenges are. Yes, we have done better than ours, but we haven't. And one last point I want to touch, which is a disease that afflicts my community, the conservationists. They are born pessimists, they give up, and they just groan and say, if we wind the clock back to some 12th century, reject all technology, everything will be fine. But unfortunately, we have Earth has to feed 10 billion people. Everybody wants material aspirations. So if you say you don't want development and you want only conservation, you are going nowhere. So it is how you balance the two. And to me, there are two ideas that are really central to it. It is not about going back to an old lifestyle of eating animal protein. There are two ideas in my education I have encountered. One is an idea that my professor John Robinson proposed, saying that don't confound development with conservation. Both are essential, but they are different. Don't try to do both at the same time in the same place. So he proposed what, I don't want to go into it, but a concept called sustainable landscapes, where certain areas are reserved for serious protection, certain for multiple use, and certain for intensive agriculture or even industrial development. This partition, he called it carving of tomorrow's world. That idea is practical, but we haven't succeeded in implementing it. Even the Environmental Management Subramaniam Committee made a mess of it. That was an opportunity when this government came to do something, they didn't. The second thing is rejecting technology does not lead to conservation. We are decrying technology, but 3-4 changes I have seen in my landscape and across India. Firewood use in developed parts of India has gone. That was the biggest threat to forests. People are using LPG. Livestock traction, which comes mainly from plowing, cattle numbers have drastically dropped. That was another threat. And the biggest threat was hunting, which you still see in Northeast India. For protein, people are eating animals. In the developed parts of India, you don't see that because average wages are multiple fold higher. People are buying domesticated chicken and meeting their protein needs. These are positive forces in our favor, and we are not recognizing them. We are seeing this only as the enemy of conservation. So I think this balancing of science, technology, and conservation should go. And as both the main speakers told today, this has to come from outside the government system. All our other reforms have come from private entrepreneurial initiative. They haven't come from top-down diktats of any civil service. So this is kind of where I am. And I will always be slightly disliked for that, but I don't care.
Thanks for that, Ullas. On technology. Now, I often say that technology is like holding a tiger by the tail. You can't let it go. You have to hold it, and you have to keep moving along with it. You'll be happy to hear that last evening, me and Mr. R.P. Singh were sitting with one young officer from Tadoba. He's here, I think, in the audience. And we were delighted to hear how he had applied AI and has successfully been able to bring down the conflict levels in a place like Tadoba, which we all know is a very high conflict zone. So there are officers, and the next gen is actually quite riding the emerging technology to make a difference. So possibly we could turn on end that one on a positive note. But before I turn to Raghu for his views on science and technology, I'm tempted to ask a rather provocative question to you, Lars. I often compare the natural ecosystem with the human body system. Has the focus on tigers been something similar to a focus on building one's biceps and triceps to the neglect of the rest of the body system? this is something that many conservationists say, that we have neglected other species and habitats. Is there any truth in that?
I think it's a half true, half false proposition. If you want to accomplish change at very large scales, there is what is called a species conservation approach. You pick a species that by its inherent ecology requires large spaces. For example, in the case tigers, not only large space, a huge prey base, which means a lot of other things. So it captures a lot of biodiversity. So I think the approach is very valid insofar as deciduous forests and some of the systems are concerned. But it does not take care of the fact that our desert, semi-arid lands are being consumed by solar power and wind power. Bustards and whatever, those creatures' habitats are shrinking. So you need to pick iconic species for different systems. It may not be more than half a dozen. A blue whale for the ocean, a particular snow leopard for certain kinds of things. So the tiger doesn't do everything. So, but it does its bit. But I think where the problem is in terms of funding, we are excessively funding tigers, ignoring other species, and even tigers we are not funding in a way that's needed. We are dumping money on some tiger habitats and ignoring a large proportion of tiger habitat. So it is true in some sense, although I love the tiger, I think we love it a bit too much.
Raghu, how would you respond to that 10,000 tigers? What would be your view on that one?
Well, Amitabh just kind of made a point that you need more than Forest Department to work on it. And so what I think is that most of our success, conservation success, come from a very exclusive model which is protected area based, and which covers only about 5 to 6% of the India land mass. There is still 15% which is not being touched. And doesn't see much conservation presence. And so if we want to have 10,000 tigers, very much possible. There is a space available to us. What we have not done is that whatever success we have not planned for our success. So if tiger goes outside your protected area, you have no conservation presence. You have no plan how to deal with it. Protected area managers feels is a threat, it's a problem. And it's something, it leads into conflict, they see as a threat. Actually, if we had planned it properly, we should see is an opportunity the tiger is going out. That's why we don't have fences in our protected area, because we want tigers to go out, we want connectivity to happen, but we have not planned for it. And that's where I was thinking that he was talking about tourism, and tourism could be a big driver in making conservation outside protected area very democratic. Where people can participate. So you can have a very inclusive conservation models where an economic driver could be a tourism, which not all the money will come from tourism, but tourism attracts quite a lot of other source of income. Charities can come in, philanthropic investments can come in, private investments can come in, and that can make tiger habitat 3 times, 4 times larger than what you have. And it will be much more highly sustainable. As we said, I'm really surprised to hear when he's talking about urbanization. When you're having that, we already have in urban areas the air pollution, water pollution, and things like that. And where the clean air, where the clean water comes from, is from these areas. And there is about 15% of that is unprotected. And we need to take care of that. And the villages who lives in that, their economy, if you look at it, we may be growing at about 8%, 6% GDP growth. Look at the rural economy, which is in the forest areas. It may be stagnant. It may not be growing. It may be negative in some areas. So where the income will come from, where the youth will get those employment. So you need to create a model which is inclusive, which is a rural development model, where the conservation is for the rural development, not for tigers, but protect in a way which is a tiger friendly in economies we need. It is very much possible. The only thing is that we need to plan for our successes. We have to create a model which is inclusive, which kind of runs parallel to what we've been doing it and strengthen that. And we can achieve that.
Thanks, Raghu. Yeah. Yes, yes.
Your 10,000 question. In the government's control, there are reserve forests. These are state-owned. We have 380,000 square kilometers of reserve forests which are classified as tiger habitat, potential tiger habitat, of which only about 10% is reasonably well protected, and we can see tigers in somewhat reasonable densities, which are 4 to 5 tigers at least or higher. If the other 90% of the area, I'm not saying all of it, if you pick and expand this 10% to 20% itself, or 30%, we can have that 10,000 tigers. What Raghu is talking about is beyond this 380,000, if you can change land use from cropping to agricultural tourism, we can connect these areas as well as have a different model of tiger conservation. So I am very, at 17, I was absolutely pessimistic about the fate of the tiger. I'm completely optimistic now.
Good to hear that. Thanks for that. Let me take the liberty and say that both of you have spoken about the stakeholders, the role of the government, role of citizens, role of conservation fraternity, science and technology. I would put these together and say that end of the day, the good and successful outcomes is when all the stakeholders play together. There may be differences, we may disagree on a few things, all right, but end of the day, it's only when we all play together is when we'll make a difference. Now, I'm tempted to ask more questions, but I think I see many conservationists among our guests. Yes. I see many conservationists in our guests. I think we should leave the floor open for questions to come from our guests. But Raghu wanted to add something.
No, I just wanted to add that how tourism can be a driver to have. You look at Scotland, the nature-based tourism, the amount of money they generate is over $4.6 billion pound. And if you look at Madhya Pradesh, where and they don't have tigers, elephants, rhinos, any charismatic, it's just walking. So the tourism, when we're talking about forest and nature tourism, we're not looking at only tiger, or you're not looking mega animals. So there is a lot of scope. There are still borders. There are still so there is a huge. The tourism could be a big driver. But the problem which I also see is that the way we were talking about threat of tourism is that the way we run currently the tourism is a problem, because what we have done is we have taken what I call Taj Mahal tourism and dumped into our protected areas, where if I have to go and see Taj Mahal, I go select a hotel based on our choice and budget, and then buy a permit and see Taj Mahal and come out. Exactly the same thing is happening in protected areas. If you're going to see a tiger, you select a hotel, you go take a permit, see a tiger and come out. So there is, if you look at my balance sheet, there were about 45% of it goes directly into the economy, local economy. I'm not talking about so a huge amount of money which is going in, but there is no conservation action is happening. If my staff continues to remain in the village, still grazes, sends livestock for grazing, collecting firewood, then that tourism is not going to help us, and that's why it's a threat. We need to change that.
I just want to, sorry to be the voice of caution here. I think tourism, ecotourism is very important. You mentioned about Scotland. There's one thing which we have to always remember. We Indians, and I start with myself first, are a thoroughly indisciplined race. We have to be very careful when we bring in any kind of tourism which will allow numbers to enter the forest. Don't end up where tourists become protein supply for the cat. And you will increase human-beast conflict. Yes, we need tourism, but we need it on very strict basis. I went to the Rajaji Park once. The Supreme Court asked me to resolve a dispute between two sets of conservationists. The National Highway wanted to make a road, widen the road. One group said, you must elevate the road and the elephant should be allowed to pass through unobstructed. The other group said, no, make the road at the same level and make tunnels under the road for the elephants to go. And the Supreme Court said, you go find out. I said, all right, I'll go and ask the elephants which one they prefer. And both had very persuasive arguments. The ranger of the park, head of the project, he said, sir, come tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock, the animals will tell you what they want. I thought he was being funny, but he wasn't. I went, I stood there, and I saw how the animals passed. And the verdict was clear. There had to be a bridge. You can't obstruct the way of the animal. Now, this taught me something. We cannot, in our efforts of tourism, we need to have very strict rules on how and where we are going to allow tourism. Let us not end up in a situation, and this is what worries me about India, where if you have mass tourism, you are going to end up completely destroying habitats.
Well, what I found very interesting was that how do we resolve the conflict between the requirement of our country's people for homes, and here we are thinking of dedicating much acreage to the animals. So how do the panelists think this conflict can be resolved, particularly for India?
If you look at India's land area, which is 3 million square kilometers, the areas reserved for wildlife, what we call national parks and sanctuaries, including some marine areas, is 4%. Now we talk about our generosity as a culture, our reverence for nature, and if you are cribbing at 4% for all these other creatures while we have 96% for ourselves, I don't see a solid argument.
And if I could add to that, we have got used to getting our water running through our faucets, so we think that air and water is freely available, does not carry an economic price. But the point is, we do not get this freely unless we leave a certain amount of land. And ecologists suggest that at least 1/3 of a large landmass should be left for forests. We often don't speak about it. Forests not only stand for biodiversity, not only stand for tigers or biodiversity or carbon sink. In fact, good part of India's water security comes from the forest. It's a monsoon country. We hold almost 1/5 of the global population, and we hold just about 4% of the water stock. We often talk about how we manage our water in the towns and cities. We do not talk about how do we manage water at the source. And the best way to hold water when the monsoon discharges is to have a standing forest. Rainwater that falls in your city runs off into the sea or gets evaporated. Rainwater in a forest is held by the root zones and is drained slowly into the aquifers or the river basins over the months. So that's the reason why we need tigers or forests, or tiger-bearing forests.
Mr. Sunil, can I ask a question? Yeah, at the end.
Ask the question.
Yeah, Mr. Sunil, today we are talking about long-lived tiger, and we have a best technology of artificial insemination, in vitro fertilization, semen preservation. So why not use this type of technology where we have used already for human? 3rd generation babies are born. So what is wrong with this technology?
I don't think those techniques are needed. A single tigress produces 15 cubs in her lifetime. And tigers are not in short supply because they are not able to breed more. The problem is there isn't the space for putting the tigers. And these even captive tigers that are raised in zoos, which are released in the wild, don't survive. They have to learn the hunting skills, adaptive skills in the wild. Your in vitro tigers will not last 1 week in a forest. So the point is that technique is very valid. If you have an island population, the last of the genes are dying out, then I agree. For the tiger, it's not really a necessary solution, and it's far more expensive than simply protecting a forest.
I want to add a word to what Ulasa said. I think it's about time when we human beings acknowledged that we have never helped nature, we have only destroyed nature. I'll give you one example. We were in this forest case, they said Madhya Pradesh is going to remove 35,000 trees because there is a particular insect which got into the tree, the sal borer. The conservationists came, I said, you must allow them. They said, they're talking nonsense. We fought very hard. Fortunately, we got an injunction from the Supreme Court. And I made sure I tried all the dilatory tactics which I've learned from Mukul to get the case adjourned. And I successfully got the case adjourned over and over again for a year. And lo and behold, the trees which were dead sprouted leaves. And instead of 35,000 trees, all they had to remove was 300 trees. So please, we human beings think that nature will not survive without us. I think it will do much better without our poking our nose in Mother Nature.
I think what you said, Dr. Harsh, that's very valid. We have seen during COVID times how things have changed. Seeing all the noels from the conservation world, I just want to ask two questions. One is, I just heard Dr. Karan talk about love for tigers. So the question is, why we have been able to save tigers, but what about the other animals that have gone extinct? Asiatic cheetah, pig-head duck, or for that matter, we are probably losing Godavari. So what are we doing about it? That was the first question. The second one was on the Asiatic lions. It's only in one area that we have the lions. If something happens to that area, we lose that animal as well. What are we doing about it?
I think it's a very complicated question. I think I partially answered the first one, which is when you pick these iconic species and protect large areas which they require, a lot of these other species get saved. You are also right that some other species which live in different kinds of habitats like snow leopards or blue whales or whatever require marine reserves and a different charismatic species. As far as the lion is concerned, absolutely all scientists agree, and Raghu and his colleagues in the Wildlife Institute worked for 30 years to create an alternate place for lions in case there is a civil unrest or some disease outbreak. Unfortunately, that in our country, the states sometimes see certain species as theirs and they won't spare it to the neighboring state. So the problem is not science or where to do it or how to do it. The problem is political rivalry between states for which conservation has no solution.
One of the things we've heard about is the genetic pool. The corridor is no longer available for tigers to move from very far down to the south. And you've now got pockets of tiger conservations and they are inbreeding. So what can be done about that? Because unless you have this corridor and natural flow of tigers from one part to the other, your genetic pool is going to get worse and worse.
As of now, there is no scientific evidence that inbreeding is causing serious problems in any tiger population. The most isolated ones like Ranthambore are also animals are moving into Madhya Pradesh. See, tigers don't need pristine forests to move through. They can move through coffee plantations, sugarcane fields. So if you manage the agricultural landscapes and forests in an intelligent way, you can maintain natural connectivity. So it is not such a critical issue that we have to now spend 90% of our budget on captive breeding or introducing animals, etc. For the tiger, there are other species where that is needed.
Firstly, thank you very much for a very, very interesting discussion. My question is specifically to Mr. Salve. Sir, there is now so many national, international commitments that we have recognizing the role of forests in not only being a habitat for species, but also being our first and final bastion for climate change, water loss, this, that and the other. Many of these are ratified by our parliaments around the world, not only in India. So in some ways these are all law, so to speak. And also it's almost now certain that without forests, direct risk to human life with climate change. So it's also a major liability to fell these. In spite of the fact that there is binding resolution, there is legality, there is policy, and there is such a risk, it's clear that only existing business as usual market policy forces are not sufficient to really arrest degradation or to be able to enhance these landscapes. So is there an enhanced role of law, legality and the courts in order to allow for us to stick to these targets, maintain the...
We already have. We already have. The entire Northeast, the orders passed by the Supreme Court of India in relation to the Northeast were based on India's commitment in protecting what are called bio hotspots. We have bio hotspots. There is an international covenant on protecting bio hotspots because they don't belong to India, they belong to mankind. Where we have failed and where the international community has failed is the idea was that if countries are required to freeze development in bio hotspots, for mankind, the world must compensate them. Unfortunately, this mechanism of compensation does not work, but our Supreme Court has enforced the biosphere covenants and directing that nothing will be done in bio hotspots. I remember in one case they prevented removal of even bamboos from bio hotspots. So yes, it has legal binding force. The courts have read this into the part of our Indian Constitution and have enforced it.
Thank you to our panelists, thank you to our moderator for that insightful conversation about conservation. Thank you to our audience for those thought-provoking questions. And as we... Right. And as they say, wonderful things do come to an end. However, let's capture this moment in time with a photograph of our panelists with our newly launched book. So if you could please pose.
हेलो हैं अच्छा भाविया पता नहीं आपका वो भी शायद मैं तो जानता ही हूँ
I'd like to invite the audience to visit the gallery and visit the exhibition, which is in the adjacent room. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, we would like Mr. Sunil Gadhoke to give us a final thank you. If we could take a seat for a minute.
यार आवाज क्लियर नहीं आ रही
So I actually have a written piece for you because I didn't want this to go wrong. So you know, the book has been a labor of love and a product that I really wanted to come out well because all the proceeds from the book are intended to go for social causes around for people around the forests of India. So that was my motivation to write the book, and I'm very happy I have such good friends over here participating in the launch. I am a first-time author, and as I got down to writing this book, I soon realized that I will need serious help. And I had no clue where to go for, but I also believe when you set out for a calling in life, nature comes out to help you out. And that is exactly what happened in my case. I got introduced to great people like Ulas and Joanna and Sunil, who all literally adopted me and carried the project through. So I would like to thank all of them, Ulas, Joanna, Sunil, for being such solid supports. And of course, I would be failing if I would not thank Harish and Raghu for being here today and giving us such enlightening discussion. It was absolutely fantastic, and And finally, I have to thank my family and my dear wife, Savina, who has been there on all the safaris and carrying all my heavy equipment.